The rifle shot cracked through the dawn silence like lightning splitting an oak, sending Clara Evans scrambling from her bed in nothing but her cotton nightgown. Her father's angry voice bellowed from downstairs, slurring words that made her blood run cold. He'd lost again at cards, and this time the price would be steep. "You ain't got no choice, girl." Matthew Evans roared as Clara descended the stairs of their modest homestead on the outskirts of Willow Creek, Arizona Territory, 1878. "I signed the papers last night. You're marrying Judge Harmon on Sunday, and that's final." Clara's knees nearly buckled. Judge William Harmon was 63 years old, 40 years her senior, and the most feared man in the county. Widowed 3 times over, with a reputation that made decent folk cross the street when he approached. "Father, please," Clara begged, her honey-brown hair tumbling loose around her shoulders. "I'm only 23. I can't marry him, I won't." The back of Matthew's hand caught her across the cheek before she could dodge. "You will. I owe him more money than we'll see in 10 lifetimes. He's willing to forgive the debt if you become his wife." Her father's bloodshot eyes narrowed. "Pack your things. You're moving to his house today." 2 days later, Clara stood trembling in Willow Creek's whitewashed church, wearing a hastily altered dress that had belonged to Judge Harmon's last wife. The ceremony was brief and loveless, the judge's bony fingers gripping her arm like iron shackles as they walked out into the bright spring sunlight. The townsfolk had gathered, not in celebration but in morbid fascination. Clara kept her eyes downcast, shame burning her cheeks as whispers reached her ears. "Poor thing, 4th time's the charm for old Harmon. Give her 6 months before she ends up like the others. Her daddy's a no-good drunk who sold her like cattle." As they reached the boardwalk, a clod of mud splattered against Clara's skirts. Laughter erupted from a group of young men lounging against the general store's porch. Judge Harmon merely tightened his grip on her arm and pulled her toward his waiting carriage. "Get used to it," he muttered. "A whore's daughter who married for money deserves no better." Tears threatened, but Clara refused to let them fall. Her mother had been no whore, just another victim of her father's cruelty, dead these past 5 years from a broken heart and broken body. From the edge of the crowd, a tall figure stepped forward, blocking their path to the carriage. The sun silhouetted him, casting his face in shadow beneath the brim of a well-worn hat. Clara blinked away tears as the stranger came into focus. "That's no way to treat a lady on her wedding day," the man said, his voice low and steady as he stared at the mud on Clara's dress. "Nor a fitting welcome for a new bride in our town." Judge Harmon's face mottled with rage. "Mind your business, cowboy." When men dishonor a woman in public, it becomes every decent man's business. The stranger removed his hat, revealing tousled dark hair and piercing blue eyes in a sun-weathered face. "Name's Finn Vance, just hired on at the Miller Ranch. And where I come from, we respect women, regardless of their circumstances." Clara's breath caught as Finn's gaze met hers briefly, not with pity, but with something that looked remarkably like respect. "You're new here, Vance," Harmon snarled. "Don't expect to keep your job if you cross me." Finn replaced his hat calmly. "Threats don't scare me much, Your Honor, never have." He produced a clean handkerchief and offered it to Clara with a slight bow. "For your dress, madam. Congratulations on your wedding day." As Clara reached for the handkerchief, her fingers brushed his, warm and calloused. "Thank you," she whispered, the first kind gesture she'd received all day lodging in her throat like a stone. Judge Harmon practically shoved her into the carriage, but not before she caught Finn Vance's quiet words. "Remember, Mrs. Harmon, you're not alone in Willow Creek." The judge's house was the grandest in town, a two-story affair with gabled windows and a wraparound porch that spoke of wealth and prominence. To Clara, it felt like a prison as the housekeeper, Mrs. Fenton, showed her to her room separate from the judge's. Thank God for small mercies. "He expects you at dinner promptly at 7, the older woman said, her face expressionless. "Wear something appropriate." That evening, Clara learned the rules of her new life. She would manage the household, accompany the judge to social functions, and present herself as a dutiful wife. She would not leave the property without permission, receive no visitors without supervision, and speak only when spoken to in public. "Your purpose is to enhance my standing in this community," Harmon told her over roast beef she couldn't stomach. "Your father's debts are cleared, and you have a roof over your head. That's more than most women in your position deserve." Clara nodded mutely, wondering if his other wives had felt this same hollow dread, if they too had counted the decades stretching before them in this gilded cage. Days passed in monotonous succession. Clara threw herself into household tasks, desperate for distraction. Each time she ventured into town for supplies, whispers and sidelong glances followed her. Women pulled their children away as she approached. Men tipped their hats with smirks that made her skin crawl. Heard she begged her daddy to sell her to the highest bidder. "Judge'll tire of her soon enough, probably already has. Gold digger with dirt under her nails, still thinks she's too good for us." 2 weeks after her wedding, Clara was leaving the mercantile with a basket of necessities when 3 local women blocked her path. "My husband says the judge is already looking bored," one sneered, loud enough for passers-by to hear. "Guess you're not much better at keeping a man happy than your mother was." Clara's grip tightened on her basket. "Please let me pass." "Why should we?" another woman taunted. "You think you're better than us now, with your fine house and fancy dresses bought with an old man's money." The third woman knocked the basket from Clara's hands, sending purchases scattering across the dusty street. "Oops," she laughed. "Clumsy me." Clara knelt to gather her things, fighting back tears as more people gathered to watch her humiliation. A pair of worn boots stepped into her field of vision, and a familiar voice rang out. "That's enough, ladies." Finn Vance knelt beside her, helping collect spilled flour and coffee. 3 against 1 seems poor odds, even for such fine, upstanding citizens as yourselves. The women backed away, muttering, as Finn efficiently repacked Clara's basket. "Thank you," she murmured, keeping her gaze lowered. "No need for thanks," Finn replied, offering his arm. "May I walk you to your carriage, Mrs. Harmon?" Despite her better judgment, Clara accepted. The warmth of his arm under her gloved hand felt like the first real thing she'd touched in weeks. "They're wrong about you," he said quietly as they walked. "This town has a short memory and a mean spirit when it suits them. You don't know me, Mr. Vance. I know enough." His blue eyes held her steadily. "I know you didn't choose this life." Clara looked away. "My father's choices became mine. That doesn't make them right." Finn helped her into the judge's carriage. "If you ever need assistance, any kind at all, I'm staying in the room above the livery." Before she could respond, he tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Clara with a dangerous flutter in her chest, and the scent of leather and pine lingering in her senses. That night, Judge Harmon announced they would host a dinner party for the town council and their wives. "Time to show them what a proper household looks like," he declared. "You'll wear the blue silk I purchased, and Clara," his eyes narrowed, "you will be charming. My reputation depends on it." The dinner party was an exercise in controlled torment. Clara served as the perfect hostess, her smile fixed in place while the guests studied her like a curiosity. The women's pleasantries barely masked their disdain. The men's gazes lingered too long on the neckline of her gown. "Such a lovely young bride, Mrs. Porter, the mayor's wife, commented with acid sweetness. "William, wherever did you find her?" The judge chuckled. "Her father and I came to an arrangement. Sometimes the roughest stones can be polished into suitable ornaments." Laughter rippled around the table as Clara's cheeks burned. She poured coffee with steady hands, determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing her wounded. "I heard your father skipped town the day after the wedding," Mr. Hollies, the bank manager, remarked. "Wise move given his debts." Clara's cup clattered against its saucer. This was news to her. Her father had left without a word, abandoning her completely. "Yes, Matthew Evans knows when he's worn out his welcome," Judge Harmon agreed. "Fortunately, his daughter has proved more useful." More laughter, more burning humiliation. Clara excused herself to the kitchen, needing a moment alone. Through the window, she glimpsed a figure on horseback passing slowly by the house, a cowboy silhouetted against the twilight. Though she couldn't see his face, something in the way he sat his horse told her it was Finn Vance, and the thought gave her unexpected strength to return to the dining room and her duties. June turned to July, bringing relentless heat that matched the growing tension in the Harmon household. The judge grew increasingly irritable, finding fault with everything Clara did. His business affairs seemed troubled, and twice she overheard heated arguments behind his office door with men whose voices she didn't recognize. One sweltering afternoon, Clara was hanging laundry in the backyard when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Peering around the sheet she was pinning, she saw Finn Vance dismounting from his horse at the back gate. "Mrs. Harmon," he called softly, "a moment of your time." Clara glanced nervously toward the house. The judge was at the courthouse and Mrs. Fenton was visiting her sister. "You shouldn't be here, Mr. Vance." "I know." He remained outside the gate, respectful of propriety despite his trespass. "But I thought you should know there's talk in town." "Bad talk about the judge's business dealings. Some say he's in trouble with men you don't want to be in trouble with." Clara's hand stilled on the damp sheet. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that follows a man home." Finn's expression was grave. "If you ever feel unsafe, Mrs. Harmon, Mrs." Fenton's scandalized voice cut through the air as she came around the side of the house. "What is the meaning of this?" "Just delivering a message, madam," Finn said smoothly, tipping his hat. "Judge asked me to tell his wife he'll be late for supper." The lie came easily, his face revealing nothing. Mrs. Fenton's suspicious gaze shifted between them. "The judge doesn't employ ranch hands as messengers." "No, madam, but I happen to be passing the courthouse." Finn mounted his horse with fluid grace. "Good day to you both." As he rode away, Mrs. Fenton rounded on Clara. "Do you have any idea what the judge would do if he knew you were entertaining callers behind his back? And that Vance fellow, of all people." "He was just passing by," Clara protested, heart racing at the near discovery. "I barely know him. See that it stays that way." "That man has been asking questions about the judge all over town. He's trouble, mark my words." That evening, Clara served dinner to a distracted Judge Harmon, his attention focused on papers spread beside his plate. "Is everything all right with your business?" she ventured, remembering Finn's warning. The judge's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "My business is none of your concern. Your concern is this household and nothing more." "Of course," Clara murmured, but something in his tense posture and the way his hand trembled slightly as he reached for his whiskey glass troubled her deeply. 2 nights later, Clara woke to shouting downstairs. Slipping from bed, she crept to the landing and peered into the foyer where Judge Harmon stood facing 3 rough-looking men. "I need more time, Blackburn," the judge was saying, his usual commanding tone replaced with something closer to pleading. "You've had time," the tallest man replied, his voice like gravel. 3 weeks more than most get. The boss wants his money, all of it, by Friday, or he'll take payment another way. I'm close to securing the funds. Friday, Harmon, or we start collecting interest in blood." The men turned to leave, the leader pausing at the door. "Pretty young wife you got yourself. Be a shame if she had to pay for your mistakes." After they left, Clara retreated silently to her room, shaking with fear. For the first time, she realized that the judge's protection, cold and unwanted as it was, might be the only thing standing between her and worse dangers. At breakfast, she found the courage to speak. "I heard your visitors last night." Judge Harmon's face hardened. "Eavesdropping now." "They threatened me, threatened us." "What have you done?" His hand struck the table. "What I've done is try to maintain our position in this town despite impossible odds. These investments require capital I've had to borrow because this damn territory is developing too slowly." "How much do you owe?" Clara asked quietly. The judge laughed bitterly. "More than this house and everything in it is worth." His eyes, bloodshot and desperate, fixed on her. "There might be a way. Blackburn has a weakness for beautiful women." "If you were to speak with him privately," horror flooded Clara's veins. "You would sell me to save yourself." "It wouldn't be selling. Merely an arrangement like your arrangement with my father." Clara stood, something breaking free inside her. "I may have been forced into this marriage, but I am not a commodity to be traded again." Judge Harmon rose, towering over her. "You are whatever I say you are, girl. You have no money, no family, nowhere to go. This town would watch you starve in the street before offering help. Remember that." Clara fled to her room, mind racing. The judge was right, she had nowhere to turn. The town despised her, her father had abandoned her, and now her husband was contemplating trading her to settle his debts. For the first time since her wedding day, she allowed herself to weep openly, the sound muffled by her pillow. When her tears subsided, a strange calm descended. If no one would help her, she would help herself. That night, after the house grew quiet, Clara changed into her simplest dress, bundled a few belongings into a shawl, and took the emergency money she'd been secretly saving from household accounts, barely enough for a stagecoach ticket. But it was something. Slipping downstairs in stockinged feet, she nearly reached the back door when a floorboard creaked. Judge Harmon stood in his office doorway, a glass of whiskey in one hand. "Going somewhere?" he asked, eerily calm. "Please," Clara whispered. "Let me go. You don't want me, you never did." "What I want is irrelevant. What I need is to maintain appearances." He approached slowly. "And right now I need you to meet with Blackburn tomorrow." "I won't do it." The judge grabbed her arm, fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "You have no choice. None of us do any more." Clara wrenched free, backing toward the door. "There's always a choice." With surprising speed for his age, Harmon lunged forward, grabbing her hair and yanking her back. Clara cried out, struggling as he dragged her toward the stairs. In desperation, she seized a heavy brass candlestick from the side table and swung it with all her strength. The impact sent Judge Harmon staggering backward, blood streaming from his temple. Clara stood frozen in horror as he slumped to the floor, unconscious but breathing. The realization of what she'd done, what it would mean, galvanized her into action. She ran into the night, barefoot and terrified, with no destination in mind beyond escape. The streets of Willow Creek were deserted in the midnight hour, most windows dark. Clara's mind raced through limited options. The stagecoach wouldn't leave until morning, and she had nowhere to hide until then. An image of Finn Vance flashed through her thoughts. The room above the livery. Before she could reconsider, her feet were carrying her there, to the one person who'd shown her kindness without agenda. The livery stable was quiet, the horses within shuffling occasionally in their stalls. Clara climbed the exterior stairs to the small room above, hesitating only briefly before knocking softly. The door opened to reveal Finn, shirtless and alert despite the hour, a gun held low at his side. His eyes widened at the sight of her, disheveled and trembling. "Mrs. Harmon, Clara, what happened?" He quickly ushered her inside, setting the gun aside. Clara's composure finally shattered as the door closed behind her. Between sobs, she explained everything: the judge's debts, his plan to offer her to Blackburn, her escape attempt, and the confrontation that ended with Judge Harmon unconscious on the floor. "I didn't mean to hurt him," she whispered, "but I couldn't let him sell me again." Finn handed her a clean bandana for her tears, his face grim. "You did what you had to do, but when he wakes, he'll come looking for you or send the sheriff. What can I do? I have nowhere to go, no one to turn to." Finn paced the small room, thinking. "I've been investigating Harmon since I arrived in Willow Creek." "Investigating?" Clara looked up in confusion. "I'm not just a cowboy, Clara. I work for the territorial marshal's office. We've been building a case against Harmon and his associates for months: land fraud, extortion, even suspicion of involvement in his previous wives' deaths." Clara gasped. "His wives, you think he—" "Nothing proven yet, but there's a pattern of convenient accidents and sudden illnesses." Finn knelt before her, taking her hands. "I was sent to gather evidence, not to expose him until we were ready, but now things have changed. Because of me. Because he's crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." Finn's blue eyes were fierce with determination. "I won't let him hurt you." "But I need you to trust me completely." Clara nodded, too exhausted and frightened to do anything else. "What do we do?" "First, we get you somewhere safe until morning. Then we use what happened tonight to force Harmon's hand." By dawn, Clara found herself hidden in the back room of the telegraph office, whose operator, Jeb McAllister, was apparently another undercover agent working with Finn. They'd spent the night documenting her statement and preparing for the confrontation to come. "Sheriff's headed for the livery with Judge Harmon right now," Jeb reported, returning from a reconnaissance mission. "The judge is sporting an impressive bandage and a story about how his wayward wife attacked him without provocation." "Time to spring our trap," Finn said grimly. "You remember what to do, Clara," she nodded, swallowing her fear. "I'm ready." When Clara walked into the sheriff's office an hour later, the room fell silent. Judge Harmon sat with his head bandaged, Sheriff Taylor beside him. 3 other men, including Mayor Porter and the bank manager, Mr. Hollies, turned to stare at her. Finn stood casually in the corner, his badge now visible on his vest. "There she is." Judge Harmon rose, pointing dramatically. "The ungrateful woman who attacked me in my sleep and robbed my safe." "That's not what happened," Clara said clearly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "And we all know it." Sheriff Taylor frowned. "Mrs. Harmon, the judge has sworn out a complaint." "I'm sure he has," Finn interrupted, stepping forward. "Just as he's filed insurance claims on 3 dead wives, swindled dozens of homesteaders out of their land rights, and borrowed money from criminals he can't repay." The room erupted in protests until Finn slapped a thick folder onto the sheriff's desk. "Territorial Marshal's office has been building this case for months, gentlemen. We have witnesses, documents, and now," he nodded to Clara, "testimony from someone inside his household." "She's a liar," Judge Harmon shouted. "A gold digger who married me for my money." Clara laughed, the sound surprising even herself. "I was sold to you to pay my father's gambling debts. There was no choice, no desire for your money. And last night you planned to sell me again to a man named Blackburn to settle your own debts." The mayor blanched. "Blackburn?" "William, you're dealing with Blackburn's outfit. Marshal's office has been tracking Blackburn's organization from Tucson to Prescott," Finn continued. "Loan sharking, protection rackets worse. And the judge here is in deep enough to try to trade his wife to save his skin. Judge Harmon lunged toward Clara, but Finn was faster, stepping between them with cold efficiency. That's enough, Harmon. You're done. What followed was chaos, accusations, denials, the gradual crumbling of Judge Harmon's facade as the evidence mounted. Sheriff Taylor, realizing the extent of the case against one of the town's most prominent citizens, had no choice but to place the judge under arrest. As Harmon was led away, still shouting threats and denials, Clara stood trembling in the aftermath, the reality of her situation sinking in. She was free of him, yes, but still alone, still tainted by association in the eyes of the town, still homeless and without resources. "It's over," Finn said softly, coming to stand beside her as the others filed out. "Is it?" Clara looked up at him. "What happens to me now?" Before he could answer, the office door burst open and Blackburn himself strode in, flanked by the same men who had threatened the judge. "Where's Harmon?" he demanded, then spotted Clara. His eyes narrowed with recognition. "You'll do just as well. A debt's a debt, and someone's going to pay." Finn moved with lightning speed, his gun drawn before Blackburn could reach Clara. "Federal marshal," he stated coldly. "You and your men are under arrest." Blackburn's hand twitched toward his own weapon, calculating his odds. "Don't," Finn advised. "You're surrounded. The entire operation is being shut down as we speak." Through the window, Clara could see more lawmen gathering in the street. Blackburn saw them too and slowly raised his hands. "This isn't over," he growled as Sheriff Taylor returned to take him into custody. "For you it is," Finn replied, keeping his weapon trained on the outlaw until he was secured. When they were alone again, Clara released a shuddering breath. "You saved my life." "You saved your own life when you chose to fight back," Finn corrected her. "I just helped with the aftermath." "What happens now? To the judge, to Blackburn, to me. Harmon and Blackburn will stand trial. As for you—" Finn hesitated. "The marshal's office can arrange for relocation, a fresh start somewhere no one knows your history." Clara looked out the window at the town that had judged and rejected her, the place that held nothing but painful memories. "I should want that, to run as far from Willow Creek as possible." "But," Finn's eyes searched hers, "but running feels like they win. Like I'm admitting I did something shameful by being a victim of my father's choices and my husband's cruelty." Finn nodded slowly. "What would you want, if you could choose anything?" "To stay," Clara said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "To rebuild my life on my own terms, to show this town that their judgment doesn't define me," she faltered. "But how? I have no money, no home, no family. You have more than you think." Finn took her hand gently. "The judge's assets will be seized, but as his wife, you're entitled to a portion for your maintenance. And as a key witness in a federal case, you'll have the marshal's protection and support. And after the case is over, when your assignment here is complete," Finn's hand tightened around hers. "My assignment was to expose Harmon and Blackburn. What happens next is up to me." His eyes held her steadily. "And I find myself increasingly unwilling to leave Willow Creek or you." Clara's heart quickened. "You barely know me." "I know enough," he echoed his words from weeks earlier. "I know you're stronger than anyone gives you credit for. I know you faced down a town scorned with dignity. And I know that since the first day I saw you, I haven't been able to get you out of my thoughts." A blush warmed Clara's cheeks. "People will talk. Let them. They'll have plenty to say when Judge Harmon's full crimes come to light, when they realize how wrong they were about you, and how wrong they were about themselves for turning their backs on someone who needed compassion." Outside, the town was beginning to stir with news of the judge's arrest. From the window, Clara could see gathering crowds, the shocked faces, the dawning realization that their respected leader had been a criminal all along. "It won't be easy," she murmured. "Changing their minds." "No," Finn agreed, "but nothing worthwhile ever is." In the weeks that followed, Willow Creek witnessed a transformation. As details of Judge Harmon's crimes emerged, the land swindles that had robbed honest families, the suspicious circumstances surrounding his previous wives' deaths, his dealings with Blackburn's criminal enterprise, the town's perception began to shift. Clara moved into a small cottage on the edge of town, paid for with her court-mandated settlement. Each day brought new challenges, sidelong glances, whispers that hadn't quite died away, the struggle to establish herself as a woman of independence rather than scandal. Finn remained in Willow Creek, ostensibly to oversee the case, but increasingly to court Clara with a patient determination that made her heart flutter. They took Sunday walks under the watchful eyes of the townsfolk, shared meals at the hotel restaurant, built a friendship that gradually, inevitably, deepened into something more. 3 months after Judge Harmon's arrest, Clara opened a small seamstress shop in a vacant storefront on Main Street. The first day, she sat alone among her fabrics and threads, waiting for customers who didn't come. The second day, Mrs. Porter, the mayor's wife who had once mocked Clara at the dinner party, stepped hesitantly through the door. "I need a new dress," she said stiffly. "For the Harvest Festival." Clara nodded, professional and composed. "I'd be happy to help you." As she took measurements and discussed fabric options, Mrs. Porter finally spoke the words that had clearly brought her there. "I was wrong about you, Mrs. Harmon, Miss Evans, I should say. We all were." "Clara," she corrected gently, "and thank you for saying so." That single visit broke the dam. Other women followed, first out of curiosity, then for Clara's undeniable skill with needle and thread, and finally because the shop became a place of welcome rather than judgment. Clara hired 2 young women to help with the increasing orders, creating a small haven of female industry and camaraderie. Finn watched her flourish with proud eyes, courting her properly with flowers and slow evening walks, respecting her need for independence even as he made his intentions clear. When he finally asked for her hand 6 months after Judge Harmon's conviction, Clara's yes was unhesitating and joyful. Their wedding at the same church that had witnessed her forced marriage was a deliberate choice, a reclaiming of space, of dignity, of choice itself. This time, Clara wore a gown of her own design and making, ivory silk embroidered with wildflowers that matched the blooms in her bouquet. The church overflowed with townsfolk, some who had genuinely come to respect and even love Clara, others drawn by the poetic justice of the occasion. As she walked down the aisle toward Finn, tall and handsome in his best suit, Clara held her head high. Gone was the frightened girl who had once stood trembling in this same space. In her place walked a woman who had found her strength in the face of cruelty and her heart in the aftermath of pain. When they emerged into the sunshine as husband and wife, the town that had once mocked Clara now stood in respectful silence. Hats removed and heads slightly bowed, not in prayer, but in acknowledgement of their own failings and her triumph over them. Finn leaned down to whisper in her ear as they prepared to walk through the gathered crowd. "They see you now, Clara, the real you." Clara squeezed his hand, smiling up at the man who had stood beside her when no one else would. "What matters is that you always did." Years later, when Clara and Finn's children played in the yards of Willow Creek, and their family had become woven into the fabric of the community, few remembered the scandal that had once surrounded the forced bride. What remained instead was the story of a woman who had refused to be defined by others' cruelty, and the cowboy who had recognized her worth when everyone else had turned away. Together, They had not only changed their own fates, but had helped transform a town poisoned by judgment into one capable of redemption, proving that sometimes the most powerful act of defiance is simply to stay, to thrive, and to love openly in the face of those who once wished you harm.